All right. Hey, thank you for being here. It's great to have you to be a part of this certification process here with Momentum Makers. My name is Lance Stoddard. I'm a certified trainer with Momentum Makers. And in this session, we're going to be talking about program implementation. We're going to be talking about a lot of the details that need to come together for the Momentum Makers program to be effective, to be successful. In light of that, let me just share a little bit of a story with you. About 25 years ago or so, I was a mid-level manager with a fairly large organization, and myself and a couple of other department heads had been responsible for pulling together an event that was going to have about 125 to 150 participants. And in our primary large group meeting room, we had set up the room, or we had actually had it set up by some of the janitorial staff, and we were walking in with the senior executive of the organization. And as we walked in, you know, I'm looking around, and he's kind of taking a look around, and it's about 30 minutes before the event goes down, and said, "Hey, you know, it looks good." He's telling me I'm really happy with this. One of our junior department heads says, "This is not going to work. This is terrible." I said, "What are you talking about?" And the senior executive kind of heard him. He said, "What do you mean, John?" And he said, "Look at the way it's set up. No, sir, this is not going to work. We have mostly gray chairs, but there's about 15 black chairs. And then there's 2 or 3 blue chairs, and there's even a green chair or two kind of dispersed through that. It looks awful." And the senior leader said, "Well, John, seriously, I mean, people are going to be sitting in the chairs. It really doesn't." He said, "No, sir, it makes a big difference. It looks bad." The senior leader said, "Well, John, it's not that big." And John says, "Sir, the color of the chairs matters." Like, wow, you're pretty serious about the color of your chairs there, John. But here's the story behind that. You know, today, John is the senior executive of his own large corporation. And there's a reason for that. Because John is a guy with an amazing attention to detail. And 25 years later, every time I talk to John, and I still have a great relationship with him, I still talk with him regularly throughout the year. Every time I talk to him, I'm like, "Hey, John, the color of the chairs matters." But you know what the truth of the matter is? The color of the chairs do matter. And you know what we did that day? We pulled all those various different colored chairs out. We found more gray chairs. And I got to be honest with you, when I stood up there and got ready to kick this thing off, even before people were sitting down, I went, I got to give it to John. It does look better. The color of the chairs matters. Look at your neighbor and tell him, the color of the chairs matters. You know? And so today, as we talk about the details, okay, I want you to remember that. Why do we spend so much time talking about some of these minor details, some of these behind-the-scene things that maybe nobody sitting in a classroom setting that you're training would be aware of? Why? Because the color of the chairs matters, okay? The details make a big difference, okay? The small things come together to support the bigger things. The bigger things come together to support the biggest things. And when the biggest things work, the event is successful, okay? So let's take a little bit of time to look at the details together. Can we do that? All right. So I'm on page 9. I'm going to be teaching out of section 2 in your books. And page 9 is actually just the cover sheet. So you can go ahead and turn with me to page 10. And we're looking at the session called Program Implementation. You should see a picture at the bottom of your page there with me over on the far right-hand side, a little bit longer beard than I'm sporting today in that picture. All right, but that's where we're at, page 10. And we're talking about program implementation. And you see there at the top, the Momentum Makers program really consists of 3 components. And we're going to talk about each of those components in this session. The first components are the training modules. You see those 8 modules over here to my left, your right, on the table. All right, so there are 8 specific training topics that Momentum Makers focuses on. So we'll be talking briefly about those. Then if you look at the lower left-hand side of that triangle graphic there, you see assessments. And assessments, we will talk about that. Assessments are actually the evaluations or the tests. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about those in just a minute. And then we're also going to discuss coaching, because it's not just learning the material, it's not just assessing a student's ability to perform the tasks that we are training, but then there's ongoing coaching that needs to happen as a student undertakes the task of importing the information contained in these 8 modules into their professional life. It's not something that just happens overnight. And all of us understand that, right? All of us realize that not only have we been, but we are today still a work in progress, right? And so that's what our coaching approach is. Our coaching then helps us maintain a consistent attitude of implementation and holding the students accountable to actually having a plan of action for taking the materials they've been trained in and applying them in a practical way in their life. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. Right? If you look there at the middle of the screen, the page, you'll actually see that what we call a training academy exists when all 3 of those components are in place. And as an individual completes the training academy, they receive a certificate of completion. It looks like this. There's a small model of it on your book, but you can see it looks like this. Now, here's the reality. Hey, maybe you're a person that certificates are a big thing and you've got a number of them on your wall, and maybe that's important to you. Maybe you're the kind of person who gets one of these and that gets thrown in the junk drawer because the piece of paper really doesn't mean that much to you. It's the experience or the information. Hey, wherever you hit on that or somewhere in between, you do you, okay? But here's the really important thing. Not so much for me, the piece of paper, but what happens when a person completes this program, that they complete all 8 of the modules and they go through the assessments and they are going through the coaching and they've completed the training academy. Now they have a documentable experience and a set of skills that can actually be put into a resume. And for a lot, in fact, for the majority of our students, the graduate program, that becomes a really important thing. And we have multitude of, a number, how about that's a better way of putting it. We have a number of very specific testimonies where individuals said, hey, I began to do the things that I learned in Momentum Makers. I put it on my resume. So just appearing on the resume doesn't really necessarily get to the door. It's not just getting it on the resume. It's actually being able to do the things, right? But they said I started to do those things. And you know what? I've experienced a promotion or multiple promotions in my job because I was able to take the Momentum Maker skills and apply them. Or, hey, I was able to actually get a new job, which brought me a little bit more seniority. It gave me some more authority. I see a greater increase in my monthly pay. And I attribute that back to the Momentum Makers experience. So that is the result of the Training Academy. You see at the bottom there that picture of me along with 6 students. Look at the upper left-hand corner. You see the organization of the business? Garden State Precast. It is a precast concrete company in Wall, New Jersey. Now, if you are like a lot of people, the first thing that I often hear is, a precast concrete company was really interested in professional skills training? Absolutely. So we came in and we did that, and here's what they experienced. It has significantly improved their interdepartmental communication. It has reduced the siloing issues where the different departments were operating independently of each other and where there was lack of communication. It has kind of torn some of those things down. It has generated interdepartmental communication, and it has really helped them with their processes and helping them see that, hey, engineering, production, shipping, sales, each one of these things not only has to be operating successfully on their own, but has to be working effectively with the other departments. And when that happens, we produce a better product, and when we produce a better product in a more efficient time frame, we generate more income because we generate more business, more income benefits all of us because that leads to higher pay, better jobs, and they've been able to connect those dots. But the reality is, regardless of whether it's white collar, blue collar, technical service industry, it doesn't make any difference. The reality is that business always demands that we interact with others, whether it as individuals in our own companies and our own teams, whether it's customers, whether it's people that we're servicing, whatever. And we got to be able to do that effectively and do it better. That's what we're going to be focusing on through this, okay? Turn with me to page 11. Let's take just a quick look at the curriculum. You see there across the top is a simple graphic that shows you all 8 of the Momentum Makers curriculum. There are 8 training topics. Each module contains 5 chapters that will walk the individual through that particular topic. Each one's about 50 to 55 pages, you can see there. And at the end of each of the chapters, there's a group activity that helps the students begin to take the material that we've trained and start to apply it to their lives. And the reason that we put these into manuals, I mean, obviously we work out of these, but one of the things that I see and I want you to catch is, you know what? At the end of training, it's not just like, okay, I've finished team skills, done with that, check, I can get rid of that. The students hang on to these things. And now they don't become a training material. Now it becomes a reference or a resource. And I can tell you that even several years on, let's go back to the Garden State Precast model, several years on from the training, I still get calls or still have conversations on occasion with some of their department heads. They'll come up and say, hey, I'm facing this issue, I have this problem, or we have this, we're exhibiting this problem, and we're trying to track down what exactly is its source. And as I start talking to them a little bit, sometimes it will come down to issues of communicating. Maybe it comes down to teamwork issues. And I can say, you know what, go back and grab that module. Let's turn to chapter number 3 in that module, and let's kind of review some of the things that we talked about. Are there any things in there that you're missing? Oh, you know what? Wow, we could do this, we could do that. That could help us. And now these become incredibly helpful reference materials, okay? So that's the 8 modules you can see there. Right across the top. Can somebody read those first 4 that you see up there? What are the 4 modules at the top of that graphic? Somebody just want to read those 4 titles out for me real quick?
People skills.
Yes, sir.
Team skills.
Yes, sir.
Communication skills.
Yep.
And professional image.
Professional image. How about somebody getting me the bottom 4?
Self-assessment skills.
Uh-huh.
Ethical skills. Managing skills. Mentoring skills.
Excellent. And those 8 modules make up the Momentum Makers system or curriculum. Now, if you look in the middle of the page there, it talks about delivery methods. Really what we're talking about now, we're not talking about Amazon here, right? Not that kind of delivery, but how can this material be presented? Okay? The first way, there's really three ways that the material can be presented. The first one is what we're actually doing right here, and that's the classroom seminar. That's where an instructor presents the material in a classroom setting, similar to what we're doing right here. It normally is taught in a one-day type of approach, so we're talking, roughly 8:30 to 4:30. It can be done a little bit more flexibly. At Garden State Precast, I actually did it on a Friday evening and then a Saturday morning. Okay, so there is some flexibility there, but you're looking at about that same amount of time, right? About 8 hours, 7.5, 8 hours or so for the material to be trained in a classroom seminar. The second way that it can be done is what we call a roundtable discussion. This is a little bit different. It's a little less formal. And what happens here is the books are obviously distributed beforehand. That even happens in the classroom setting. But we expect the students have read through and prepared for the training session. That's, again, true in the classroom setting. But in the roundtable discussion, generally we find that it works better when you have people who have some level of work experience, of life experience. Because the way the roundtable discussion works is we sit literally around a table, and now I'm not presenting as I'm doing with you right now. I really kind of change hats from kind of instructor more to facilitator. and I'm working to facilitate a discussion focused around the outlines contained within these models. So we still work through all of the same material, we still discuss it, but rather than it being more of an instructor presenting it, it becomes the entire group kind of bringing personal experience, personal examples, and their own personal story to the table, and then we interact around those. And so again, my role then really changes from more of an instructor to more of a discussion facilitator. At Garden State Precast, the precast concrete company, this is the model that we used. And it worked really well. It worked really effectively. But I think you could see that if we're talking particularly about entry-level people, that becomes difficult because they don't have a whole lot of experience to draw from, work experience. And so this model seems to work better in those types of settings. Okay? But the roundtable discussion is the second one. You got to be careful with the numbers there. You see that it says the group of no more than 10 people. When a roundtable discussion gets beyond about 10 people, it just becomes a little unwieldy to facilitate the discussion. So you're really talking about a smaller setting, okay, with people who are bringing some personal experience to the table, and the certified trainer really then becoming a facilitator of the discussion. And then the third one that you see down there is the semester-long class. Now, this material is utilized by some schools, both middle school, high school, and we are looking into this being utilized even in some college or university settings. And so in those types of settings, generally what you'll see is they'll take two of the modules, they will combine them together, or they will teach them back to make up a semester-long class. And really in those settings, it's oftentimes lecture just like this, or a lecture style presentation. That's really up to the training site, how that material is going to be presented. Okay? But it can be presented that way as well. So there's three ways that it can be presented: classroom seminar, roundtable discussion, and the semester-long class. Any questions on those? All right, let's turn to page 12. We're talking here about the assessments, okay? When you hear the word assessment, think this. This is tests, this is exams, okay? But slightly different. You see, there's a fundamental difference between the idea of education and the idea of training. Education is the transfer of information. And at the end of that transfer of information, all of us did this in school, we have a test, which basically assesses, did you retain the information that was communicated during the class? All of us have done that, right? We've all been a part of that, okay? Training, however, as I said, is a little different. Training is not just the transfer of information, but it's actually the transfer of specific skills. That's the fundamental difference between education and training. Somebody do this for me. Let's look at the 6 assessments very quickly here. Would somebody read number 1, just the bold letter for me there? Number 1, what's our first assessment?
Attendance and participation.
Attendance and participation. Did they show up and did they actively participate? What does that look like? Well, exactly that. As an instructor, I'm looking to see, am I getting interaction from each of the students? If I have somebody who's kind of sitting back, not engaging in the class, at a break, at some point there's an instructor, I may go over and say to them, hey, I need you to be a little bit more engaged. I need you to be a part. As an instructor, I may actually call on that individual. Hey, give me a little bit of input. What do you think about this? You know, kind of call them out and draw them in. One of the ways that we look, or the way that we assess that, if you take a look at page 13, you can see there's an example of the attendance and participation log there. That's how we evaluate their attendance and their participation. How about number 2? What do you have there? Somebody want to read that bold letter for me? What's the second assessment?
Reading log.
The reading log. We expect that every student comes to the class having read through the entire module. And if you take a look at page 14, you will see that there is a module reading log there that we record as well. How about number 3, oral presentation? What do you think when you hear that? Anybody go, oh, wait a minute, I have to say something? Well, yeah, actually we expect all of our students to do that. And here's why. Not everybody has a job kind of like mine, which involves a lot of public speaking. And yet we recognize that one of the important skills in professionally and in leadership is being able to be a good communicator, whether that's in a one-on-one, a one-on-few, or a one-on-many type setting. But many of us don't have the opportunity to develop those skills a lot of times. We need to give people the opportunity to develop those skills, and so that's what we do. And so we ask them to make an 8 to 10 minute oral presentation addressing those 4 things. What was the brief summary of the module, right? Do you see those there under number 3? What was most impacting for you? How are you going to apply it individually? And how are you going to apply it or reflect this professionally? And that's what the oral presentation is about. You can see the next one down there. On page 15, you will see a feedback form, and we ask each of the students who are listening to the oral presentation of their classmate to actually give their classmate some feedback on how well they did, to help them get better, to identify one thing that they did well, one thing that they need to improve on, and help them get better at their oral presentation skills. Number 4 is a response paper. Equally as important as oral presentation for leadership and for professional skills, you need to be a good communicator in your written work as well. In fact, in the world of email and text and those things, it becomes even more important that you do those things well. And so we also ask you to write a response paper, 2-page response paper. What you see there, if you look at that, it covers the very same things that we're asking them to cover in their oral presentation. What we are not looking for in the oral presentation is for somebody to stand up and just read their response paper. That's not what we're looking for. They cover the same material, but we're looking for someone who can take what they've written in their response paper, internalize it, and then communicate it orally in the oral presentation without having to read directly from the paper. That's what we're looking for. So the oral presentation and the response paper both cover the same material, but they do it in different ways. And you can see some examples of the response paper there on pages 16 through 18. Then there's also a take-home test. Pages 19 through 25 give you the example there, and you'll see an example of a take-home test with the answer key. It's 25 question, multiple choice, or true and false, okay? It shouldn't be too intimidating. It should be fairly easy. It's an open book test, so the students are able to do that fairly efficiently or fairly successfully. And then the 6th assessment is the take-home assignment. And in every module, we have a take-home assignment where the student is asked to actually go out and do something. That might be going out and doing an interview with a business leader to find out a little bit about how they got to where they are and what kind of brought them to that place in the industry. It might be going to a fast food restaurant and assessing their customer service skills. It can be a number of different things, but we're asking them to do something practical that they go out and do. And you can see an example of one of the take-home assessments on pages 26 and 27. So when those 6 things are present, we are looking at or assessing the student's ability to demonstrate the skill set that we have taught. Not just the information, but the actual doing of the skills. All right? Any questions about assessments? Great, let's jump over all of that information that I just kind of referenced, and we're going to go to page 28, and we're going to talk about the third of the 3 components, and that is coaching. After each one of the modules, when you complete this, usually about 2 to 3 weeks after the training, we look to have a coaching call. And that's really the opportunity for the instructor or the person that's handling the coaching calls. Sometimes that's the instructor, sometimes it's somebody from the organization, the business that's using our curriculum, and that's really their choice, okay? But at some point, about 2 to 3 weeks afterwards, there will be a coaching call. And it's just simply a check-in to say, hey, how's it going? How have you been able to use the material? How's it going? Questions about that, concerns, problems. How have you taken what we've talked about in the classroom and how are you utilizing this now in your professional life? And you take a look there. It can be done by phone. It can be done face-to-face. It can be done via Zoom. I'll be honest with you, all of the coaching calls that I did with Garden State Precast, the Precast Concrete Company, we did via the telephone. It's a 30-minute check-in, a 30-minute opportunity for someone to hold them accountable to make sure that the material is actually being effectively used. And you can see there the learner describes how they're implementing it, putting it into practice. They talk about the challenges, the obstacles, and the coach then does exactly what a coach does, offers advice, encouragement, suggestions about how to take the material and make it more effectively a practical tool in the toolbox of the student. All right. So that happens 8 different times, once for each of the modules over the course of the training. Let's take a look at page 29. And we can talk about the different training options. There's really 2 different ways this material can be taught. Number one, in-house, we call this a We Teach. And what that is where Momentum Makers actually sends a certified trainer like myself or like the other gentleman that will be up here training you today. And we will send that certified Momentum Makers trainer to the business and to the organization, the not-for-profit, whoever it is that's using our material, and we'll provide the training for them. You can see this is most common often with smaller and mid-sized businesses. We create a customized package for them that meets their needs. The certified trainer comes in and does the teaching. Then there's some discussion as to whether the certified trainer or someone from Momentum Makers will be doing the grading and the coaching calls, or if somebody from their organization will do it. If Momentum Makers is taking it on, obviously that's another aspect that we add to the contract, and there's an additional cost associated with that as well for us to take that on, but we can do that for them, or they can choose to do that themselves. But the big thing here is the training is actually being done by a Momentum Makers trainer. The second way that we train this material is what we call a They Teach, or that's where the organization will actually come in and do the training themselves. And at Momentum Makers, I think one of the skills that we bring to the table, one of our strongest skills, is equipping other trainers. And my military background in the U.S. Coast Guard was in training other trainers, and we have that as a strong skill set within our organization. So we will come alongside them, and we will we will identify 4 to 8 instructors oftentimes within the organization. Oftentimes this is with larger businesses that maybe have their own training staff. It's also with schools, they have their own instructors. And we will take them through a train the trainer process where we orient them to the Momentum Makers material, and we take them through a process identifying 6 key steps of instruction. You're going to hear about those a little bit later today. But we walk them through a train the trainer program, which gives them some basic skills and helps them be more, positions them to be more successful in the classroom. All right. So there's 2 different ways that our material can be taught. Either we teach it or they teach it, and we equip and train them to do that. All right. Let's take a look here then at page 30, and I want to talk with you as we close about the 5 uses of the program. There's basically 5 contexts in which this material can be utilized, or where it's being utilized now. The first one, obviously, on page 30 is in a business context. Businesses, both large, small, utilizing this to train their various levels of leaders and managers in essential people skills. You'll find that right there. You can see there is simply a flyer. This is a 2-page flyer, pages 30 and 31, that we hand out to businesses. You can check that out. So business is one way. If you flip over to page 32, community outreach is another way. This is where a not-for-profit, sometimes a local church or a local community service program will say, hey, we want to give employable skills to our community, and we want to serve our community in that way. And that local community organization will then get certified to train this material, and then they'll put out a shingle and say, hey, if you want to get an employable skill, something that you can add to your resume, something that will position you for a better job, you can come to our training site. Oftentimes there's a small cost associated with it, or that's a cost that they assess, not something that we set to it, but they can say, here's what it's going to cost you, and at the end of this you get an or you get something you can actually put on your resume. And so we see this taking off. There's a great program called the Portsmouth Consortium in Portsmouth, Virginia, that's utilizing this in this way, right? If you turn over to page 34, you see that schools, we have several middle schools and high schools that are currently or have used this in the past. We have a couple of colleges that are looking at utilizing this curriculum. It fits well into either of those. One of the things that we hear a lot about this generation, I have kids that are in their mid to late 20s, and we do a good job of equipping them with STEM, right? Science, technology, engineering, mathematics. But one of the areas that we hear consistently that this generation struggles with is in the interpersonal skills and the people skills, which is what we focus on. So there's a great need for this, and we're hearing this from business leaders all around the country. It's not just Momentum Makers is hearing it, but people are talking about this. And so we want to position ourselves to meet that growing need in the American workforce as well. If you take a look at page 36, you'll see that we also have a program that is presented to inmates, individuals who are currently who are currently incarcerated. There's a reason that we want to focus on this. You know that in our nation, there's a big problem with recidivism. That means that individuals who have been incarcerated, they're released. Within 4 years, there's a very high percentage of them that end up back behind bars. One of the studies that's out there shows that, man, if we can get that individual into a stable job that they can hold down for a year, recidivism drops significantly. One of the things that many of these men and women struggle most with is interpersonal skills. And so if we can train them with these things while they are incarcerated, we position them to be an effective employee. And if they can be an effective employee, hold that job down for a year, the chances of them reoffending, going back to jail, drops significantly. If they can't hold down a job, there's a very high possibility that that individual will be back behind bars within 4 years. So we see this as a way to make a huge investment in that group of people and position them for success in reintegration back into society. And then finally, on the opposite end of that spectrum, we have law enforcement officers. Law enforcement officers always have a need of dealing interpersonally with individuals, right? They have to deal with the public every day. And our program fits both in the training academy approach as well as in the ongoing professional skills training that is required by most departments, police departments, sheriff's offices, things like that. So there's 5 different areas that our program is being utilized right now and has seen success. And these are them. You can see those outlines there. I hope that this has been informative for you. And let me remind you of something. The color of the chairs matters. Can we remember that? We focus on the details. The color of the chairs matters. Thanks for your attention. Thanks for your time.